This week's show of the Money Huddle is one that I am excited about. I had a recent opportunity to meet with a financial therapist, and I thought what he does is fascinating, and I wanted to introduce him to all of you as our listeners and guests. So without further ado, check out this week's episode, my interview with Ed Coambs.
Welcome to the Money Huddle, a podcast that explores financial topics for families and small business owners. Hosted by Michael Baker and Ross Marinell. All opinions expressed by Michael and Ross or any podcast guests are solely their own opinions and may not reflect the opinions of Planners Alliance. The podcast recording is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for investment decisions. Clients of Planners Alliance may maintain positions in securities discussed on the program.
All right, welcome back to the Money Huddle. My name is Michael Baker, and today I have a very special guest, a new acquaintance, a new friend of mine. His name is Ed Coambs, and Ed is the owner of Healthy Love and Money. He's actually based out of Charlotte, North Carolina, so this is fantastic for me because I can go knock on his front door anytime I want and bug him. But he has been so gracious to jump on and do the podcast with us, and so that is my introduction, but I'm going to kick it over to you, Ed. And why don't you just tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, thanks, Michael. I appreciate it. So I spend a lot of my time working with couples day in and day out as a couples therapist. And a lot of couples come to see me are really hung up around money. They get in fights about money and how to allocate it and who has control, who has power, what they're doing. And they just experience a lot of frustration. And so through my counseling process, I really help them get to the root of what's going on. And usually what they come to learn pretty quickly is, man, my partner's not so bad after all, but man, they've had some bad experiences with money that are showing up in these fights they're having now. And so that's a big part of the work I do. And then I'm really excited because I've got a course online called the Family Money Tree where, if you can't come in and see me, you can go in and grab the course and start walking through how your family tree shapes your relationship with money.
And I bet that is very eye-opening for a lot of people. One of the phrases I heard or read years ago about personal finance that has always stuck with me is that more is caught than is taught when it comes to money. And I'm sure you've never ever heard that before, have you, Ed?
Oh, my mind is blown right now. I've never heard that today. I think it's right on, and I remember hearing that many years ago as well as I was kind of getting in the field myself. And I think what's great is, after spending many years in the field and a lot of time in the research literature, it supports that fully. All the social science supports that little kids are picking up all kinds of things from their parents. A lot of the times, not even things parents recognize they're giving to their kids. And so a lot of times, clients, once they start recognizing that, hey, that was really more about my mom or my dad or my step parent and not about me, man, the stress and the relief starts to fall away from them about money and what they've done or not done. So, yeah, I think, that simple little phrase, it packs a lot of power when you start unpacking it.
Well, really quick, just to piggyback on what you said, just to highlight the point, as a parent, my wife sends me a text message today. So my dad, so Paw for my kids, was visiting with us yesterday, and he told a story about me and my sister as we were growing up. So he was telling my kids a story about us when we were little. And my mom sent me a text message, and she said that she heard my daughter, a 7-year-old, like reenacting that story, pretend. And so it's just one of those things that you don't really, I think, fully appreciate until you are a parent or you just work with a lot of parents at how much your kids, they pick up everything, even things that you would never think that they are tuned into. And money is one of those topics because hopefully this will lead into another, little nugget from you. But money is something that most people like to avoid talking about sometimes. And we think that it's just, oh, well, I'll teach by showing them, but we won't have conversations. And how do you see that playing into not just raising kids, but also marriage dynamics and how couples come together and have to deal with their money?
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot there. And one of the things that I really focus pretty heavily on is the science of attachment, right? And the science of attachment basically says every human is wired with a psychological and biological or physiological system that's designed to help them bond, right? So you have kids, you've held that little baby, you look down in their eyes and they look back at you, and
Hmm.
oh, isn't that sweet?
Yes.
That's the attachment system at work. And you have that interaction with that sweet little baby many times over, and your wife does, and that little baby grows up saying, man, people love me in the world and it feels good to be alive. But what happens, unfortunately, for a lot of people is they don't get that experience in their childhood where their parents are gazing at them and reflecting back on their experiences. And that hurts the attachment system and puts little chinks in the armor. And so you imagine that's all developing in concert with money. And children don't have a huge vocabulary, but man, they're sharp on emotion. And they know when mom and dad are upset, and they know
Mm.
when mom and dad are sad, and they know when mom and dad are happy. And so they're picking up the emotional tone and volume, even if you never speak loud about money, about the meaning of money based on emotion. And so if you grow up in a family where you hear mom and dad or mom or dad angry, upset, hostile, aggressive, condescending about money, that's all getting stored in your memory bank.
Yeah, they make that connection that money is one of these triggers for negative things.
Right. And loss of relationship and difficult emotions. And so no wonder why we avoid talking about money.
Right.
Man, we got all these experiences, some of them directly our own, but man, a lot of them just picked up from our family when our families have not talked about money in a healthy way. I'm going to steal from John Gottman here. He's a famous marriage therapist. And he says a healthy couple has about a 5-to-1 ratio of good interactions to bad interactions.
Okay.
And man, I'd love for people to just sit down and think about how many good to bad interactions did they see between their parents and money.
Oh wow. Yeah. That's probably scary for people to think about.
It might just blow you up a little bit, but I think when we take the risk to look at these hard facts, um, it can be a game changer. It is a difficult journey to take into, and that's something when we first got to meet just a little while ago. I really appreciate your curiosity about you know this financial journey is not about getting one magical piece of information. More and more, we're coming to see that this money journey is about really working on who you are as a person and the way you see yourself and the way you experience your significant other and your kids. Right? Money's a
Absolutely.
platform for personal growth.
No, you said it perfectly. There is a growing cohort, I would say, of advisors, financial planners, integrated financial planners. The language is fungible, but there's a growing cohort in our business that I believe is keenly aware that the technology is creating efficiencies, and it's allowing us to explore other areas because we're no longer spending hours and hours and hours doing analysis and complex calculations. We have computing power that can do that.
Right.
How do we move the ball down the field, and help the clients grow? And I think a lot of folks in our industry are starting to look at, now we have time to really focus on helping people realize money as a tool and how to live their best lives or become the best version of themselves, or pursue goals and dreams where so much of the traditional, I would say, financial planning used to be all about the data, all about
Yeah.
the boring slog fest of talking about money that people hate doing. And so
Right.
it's like you have a lot of people that just reject that, like, oh, I don't, another financial meeting, oh no thank you, I'd rather you go to my dental appointment.
Yep.
And but now we get to talk about some of these more qualitative topics
Mhm.
about money and personal finance, where we can really uncover, and I think help people free themselves from some of these negative money scripts, negative habits that they might have, or just ideas in general about money. What are your thoughts on that type of transformation with the industry?
Yeah, I think so. I think, the, the profession is evolving. The field of financial planning is evolving. And I think you're right. A lot of the technological advances are freeing up planners to realize I don't have to sit down and do all the number crunching. And so, what's really important here? Well, what's really important here is having a meaningful life. And how do I feel good as a planner when I feel like I'm helping people live a meaningful life?
Absolutely.
For most planners, just helping clients accumulate more wealth doesn't really light their fire a whole lot. And so I think there's a stage in growth or maturity where you realize, man, my job is about a lot more than just getting the right investment allocation and tax strategy. My job is about really meeting people where they're at, discovering who they are, knowing what their fears, concerns, anxieties, confusions are around money, helping them alleviate that as much as possible, and then helping them go out and live a life that's meaningful and purposeful. And I really believe now we all need guides in life. We all need people that can help us continue to cast vision for where we're going and what we want to achieve. And that becomes a critical role the financial planner can play, because things about people as a planner that nobody else knows. You know what their actual net worth statement is. You know how
Right.
they hold their debt. You know how they hold their investments, their charitable giving. Their closest friends don't even have a squeaky idea. There's just the neighborhood gossip. Oh, the Joneses are doing so good.
Right.
You know how good
Well,
the Joneses are doing, financially speaking.
that's a that's a fascinating. That's could be an entirely different segment on the show, but I find myself. My wife's name is Elizabeth, and I have told Elizabeth many times. You know, we are conditioned to look at the exterior, like what we see,
Yeah.
and think, like, oh, everything looks great. Things must be great. And I was like,
Mhm.
no, if there's one thing that this business has taught me is that there are a lot of ways that we can fake it when it, to make it look like, hey, everything's fine financially. We've got it all together. We have all the trappings of material success, but behind the curtain there is a total mess, and I try to help, I want to try to help her understand, because we have conversations about things, and it's always interesting, and you can't help yourselves. That's the human part of it, is
Mhm.
you put yourself down in the neighborhood and you think, I'm not going to look at my neighbors and I'm not going to have comparisons. But slowly but surely you start looking at your friends, you start looking at your neighbors, you can't help but look at and try to compare. I think is part of like how we're wired as people.
Well, I think that's a great setup to right back to that whole attachment piece.
Sure.
Humans are wired to form and bond and make connection. We are wired to assess our environment, to know who has more and less. You think about it in one way, it's a beautiful thing that we can, quote unquote, judge people. We do it all the time, and we need to be able to do it, to hire people into the right jobs, to know where we should go relative to what our skills are.
Hmm.
And so judging people has such a negative rap. But I think there can be a toxic way of judging, and there can be a productive way of judging and evaluating. And that's really what we need to work on differentiating. And so, we got to let go of that old saying, stop trying to keep up with the Joneses. It's not possible.
Right.
What's more possible is going inside and knowing what's really important to me and being able to touch base and say, am I getting too off track with my reference group? But if you're going to move neighborhoods, you're going to adjust your expectations. I mean, I think, case in point for me, we started out in our starter home and we were fortunate to be off to a good start. My wife was a dentist. And so I knew in general we had a higher than average income for the neighborhood. And I kind of felt like king of the mountain. But then we moved to the next neighborhood. All of a sudden, I was like, we're
You
not,
got on a different mountain.
we're at the base of the mountain here, and I don't know how steep it is. And
Oh man.
so, you go from that like place of social comparison to, I had a chance to work in microfinance and do a fellowship in the Philippines, and my whole brain got wired to being in a developing country or in the developing section of the Philippines. And I remember I came back, and my parents had to go to Costco after I got back. I'm in my mid 20s, and I literally was just like having a panic attack in Costco because it just all felt so big and so much and so overwhelming. And so our minds are wired to get comfortable with the environment we're in. And on the whole, that's a good thing. But when we live in neighborhoods and environments where one family might be making 100,000, another family's making 300, but you're in the same neighborhood, yeah, you're gonna have different things that you're doing, but you can't, you don't get to ask your neighbor like, "Hey, how much do you make?"
Right. We don't talk about those things. Those aren't polite, conversational. I mean,
Like,
that would be
Mike,
very
how much did
awkward.
you make last year? What's your,
Yeah, exactly. Just
you're like,
even
"No,
I
no
know we're
problem, thanks."
I know we're playing pretend, but it's even just in that, it's like, oh, don't ask me that. But one thing I definitely, selfishly, I want to get out there because I've had to make this mental leap myself, and I think that others may fall in the category as well. And that is, when you tell people that you are a therapist, therapy, I think, has a negative connotation with a lot of people. From my side of the table, sure. Like I know, like if I told somebody, like, I really think you would benefit from financial therapy. I don't see that going over well. So I'd have to work on the delivery, and we talked about that when we were in person. But how do you, with this being your primary, vocation, working with married couples
Yeah.
on multiple topics, how do you introduce that idea that this isn't about a negative connotation, that this is something that's positive?
Wow. Yeah, I mean, that's certainly a loaded topic, and organize like, where I see it is, um, it's by the time that a couple is coming in, and typically one of the 2 people is being brought by their spouse, right? And so it's a little bit of a
They're being dragged into the office.
right, right. They don't wanna be there, they don't see the value, and it's usually because they're afraid of being cast as the bad guy. And I don't know about you, but I don't like being cast as the bad guy. I don't like
Nobody
being
does.
cast as if there's something wrong with me. And so one of the ways I like to start reframing it is that, especially with my couples, is we operate as a system that interacts with each other. So what I do impacts you, and what you do impacts me, and what happened to me in the past has impacted me, and what's happened to you. And it starts to take off some of the heat of like, well, it's all my fault or it's all their fault. And I think, one of the other big things is really, it was a huge mental leap, Michael, for me to get there to say, you know what, I really did have some things that were painful in my life. Like, as guys, I think we get this message that it's not okay to have had painful things happen to us. And so you're figuring out like, man, it really is okay that I had some things that didn't feel so good, that I didn't like, that I had to block out. Maybe you don't even know that you blocked it out. And it's a huge hurdle. And I'll tell you what, man, I'm a therapist and I believe in it now, but it took me a couple years to get there. Uh,
You had to do your own work, right?
I had to do my I had well, this is how bad I was. And that might be a little harsh when I say it, but I'll just put it that way. Graduate school said you need to do 20 sessions of counseling for yourself, and in my little private voice, I said, "For what?
Yeah.
I'm fine. I'm here to help everybody
Who
else."
me?
Who, me? No, no, I don't need it. They need it. Everybody else needs it.
Right.
I went through those 20 sessions and maintained that attitude, and I'll tell you how much I got out of it. Not much. It wasn't until I really started falling flat on my face and having to come to terms with the problems I was having that I was like, man, I need this. I've got to figure out if this is really true. And it's been a ride. I mean, I think, people's fear and trepidation about counseling, there's some legit reason for that.
Mhm.
Because, look, we all experience painful things, some of us more than others. But trying to deal with that painful stuff in your life is not a walk in the park. But what I know on the other side is it feels so much better. It's not always Therapy is not always a quick fix, which is what most of us want. But if you make the investment and take the long haul, you come out the other side so much more confident.
I love how you used a perfect like investor like monetary wealth analogy there
Yeah,
to talk about your emotional and like interior health being an investment for the long haul. And the title of our show is the Money Huddle, and we normally under normal when I say non-COVID-19 circumstances, there's all kinds of sports, and we like to throw in professional sports metaphors when we can, just because my business partner and I, we are always talking sports in the office when we're there, like
sure.
working back and forth. Um, and one of the things that I was thinking about as you were sharing some of your experience was, we look at these great athletes and we're like, man, look at a Michael Jordan, look at a LeBron James, a Tiger Woods, look at all of these different, athletes that we would say have reached the pinnacle of their profession. Kobe Bryant is another one. And every time, if you start peeling back the layers of their life, they have a setup where like they have a chef, a personal trainer, a physiotherapist, a massage, they have someone who does all of their business dealings, a manager. I mean, they have this team of people around them, because for them to be the best at what they do or be the best selves that they want, when they go to perform, they need to only be focused on that, and they need to know everything else. And that's kind of how I think I'm thinking more and more about when we come into the table, like from our financial lives. I don't know anybody that comes in like, man, I'm okay with my financial life just being a mess. Most folks want their financial lives, they want all of their rowers rowing in the same direction,
Right.
ducks in a row, whatever your analogy, fits. And I keep thinking like, there's all these different facets to our financial lives
Mm-hmm.
that, I mean, it can be really difficult. And that's the one key that I've told many people, especially small business owners, when I'm talking with a small business owner, I'm like, look, you need to focus on being the best at whatever widget. If you're making widgets, you need to be the best at making widgets, and that needs to be your sole focus. All this other stuff, you need to not have that on your brain. You need to hire a team that can work behind the scenes so that you could be the best at that. And that's kind of how I'm relating that to, like, when we talk about, you talk about couples and marriages. There are so many things that can trip us up in our relationships, because we're bringing, like you said, your family tree. It's not just us coming to the table.
Yeah.
It's like a whole history coming with you that's unseen on the wedding day. And then your spouse is the same. There's this whole unseen, tsunami of people coming in.
Yeah.
And then we're not normally equipped to deal with or even discuss these issues. So there's just all these obstacles when really they're like, hey, we just want to love each other and be happy. But then that's great. And then you have kids, and then, you have different ideas about kids. So it can get complicated much faster, I think, than a lot of people realize once you move beyond the honeymoon phase of being married. And what are your thoughts about my ramble there?
Oh man, it actually has me almost jumping out of my chair. Like I've got to keep myself buckled down here because I'm like I feel like something just flew wide open for me here, Michael. You gave me
Okay.
permission to use a sports analogy, and my guy friends, they know
Yeah,
I'm not that big a sports guy, and so they don't bring it up with me a lot. And
sure.
what I think I'm getting right now is Ed, let it fly. I mean, I love sports. I love my whole thing was I love playing them, not watching them. But I think really what was coming to my mind as you're talking about, and I was thinking about that previous question that I just wasn't happy with my answer, to be honest. Well, how do you help people get into therapy? And I think your sports analogy is it, especially probably more for the males than the females. But there's a
Right.
lot of women that are highly competitive athletes, and it's a beautiful thing. And I'll tell you what, I mean, I'm going to date myself, but Joe Montana and Jerry Rice were a beautiful team.
Fantastic.
Did they do it on their own? No. Were they great athletes? Yeah, but they had coaches helping them. Do they have any shame about having coaches help them get their rhythms and timing and pacing up?
Not
No.
at all.
And that's really what marriage counseling, especially marriage counseling, is all about. Is I'm teaching you how to run the routes together. So you stop throwing the ball and having to run the wrong damn route.
Right.
Like that gets old. You wanna know if she's running downfield, you're gonna throw it and she's gonna catch it. Or if she's QB and you're running down route, you
Absolutely.
and it's like, yeah, you can miss the ball once in a while. That's all right. That's expected. But man, if you keep missing the ball, that's a problem. And I heard kind of in this might be too far of a side juncture. Just pull me in here. But I was talking with some friends about what I do the other day, and she's like, "Oh, you mean it's like you help people like us, like when my husband brings out the balance sheet and I go running down the hall the other way." I said, "Exactly." Right?
Right.
It's like he's trying to get her in the game, and she's running the other way, and that's normal. That's normal for a lot of couples, but I can tell you that's not healthy.
Right. No, I think one of the things that I have found in my experience in working with couples, um, especially older couples, not to age people, but
Yeah,
my couples that have been married 20, 25, 30 years,
yeah,
there is a good percentage of them that have found a way to have what I would call like this uneasy peace or
mm,
an uneasy truce when it comes to their
yeah,
financial lives, because they know that there are hot buttons there, and if one of those buttons get pushed, we get emotional flooding, and then all of a sudden we're in this argument,
right.
and nobody wants that. That's not what we want. So we've learned to kind of keep the peace, and we know like where the boundaries are, and we just stay in our little box. And as long as we stay in our box, we're safe. If we get out of the box, we're going to have conflict, and we don't want conflict.
100%, 100%. And so that's where I think you're really seeing like, man, I'm tired of seeing that happen because I know people aren't living their full financial life. And how do we bring people to the table to have these conversations that are difficult? How do we diffuse the hot buttons here for these couples? Because it doesn't have to be that way. So,
What
go ahead.
No, what I was gonna say is where I have suspicions is when we'll do this great planning work, and we're like, all right, you tell us what you need, we're gonna give you the money, and we want where we are, where I start to view success and looking at metrics for success is, it's not how big is the account balance. That's that's wonky, because that's a moving target, right? If we've got investments, that's going to always be a moving target. But I'm thinking like, okay, are we going on vacations? Are we getting to do fun life experiences with our family, with our friends, with our grandkids? Are we living out the life when we say, man, life is fantastic? Are we living that out? And is money a tool that can help us achieve those things? And that's going to look different for everybody. And usually when I've seen couples, I'm like, that aren't doing those things, or there's some kind of hold on them. And that's what makes me think like, okay, how do we help them understand that, they've done great. They've got a plan. They can go and enjoy things. They can go and do these things. And some people have no problem spending. Some people have immense problems spending. And I think the first version, so that's one version, and the other version is how can I help my younger couples that are starting businesses, maybe trying to settle into what they truly believe might be their career path. Their earning power is starting to kick up. They're starting families. How can I help them understand that money is a tool. Money is here to help us live out life. But it can also be the source of conflict. And if we ignore it, we're going to have compounding work against us in that department, where we're going to have issues that just compound over time. And then they blow up one day and we don't realize, like, how did we get so far apart on this?
Absolutely. I love it. And I'm going to build off your metaphor because I've just started using this recently. the investment idea, right? What happens if you invest at a 7% positive rate of return over 30 years? You start with
Tremendous.
$1,000.
Yes,
It's crazy money.
absolutely.
You think about if you invest in your relationship positively at a 7% rate. I don't know how we would measure that 7% investment rate, but conceptually,
Sure.
you're going to have a crazy awesome relationship. It's going to happen because financial intimacy is not a fixed sum. Financial connection, relational connection is not some fixed capped amount.
Right.
Intimacy is a continuously deepening experience. There's always more that can happen. But conversely, just like what happens if you have a negative 7% return year over year?
Most people would bail on year 3. I mean,
That's right. That's right. And we are earning negative rates of return in our relationships all the time. We're and so that's where that relationship burnout happens is we don't know how to get back to a positive rate of return in the relationship. And your work and my work of helping couples get perspective and focus around it. And I would say, at that deep level, I play the attachment card a lot because it is the wiring that drives your relationship. And I think once people realize, like, hey, you know what, I really did have some experiences that impacted this whole attachment thing for me, and it really leads me to show up in a way that doesn't help me long term have the relationship I want. The great news is our attachment system is not fixed. It's stable, but it's not fixed. And what I mean by that is you can literally change the way you view yourself and view others through engaging in an intentional process of reflection, healthy relationships. Typically, it's going to take some therapy to get there, but no different than if you had something else going on with another part of your body that needed some additional therapeutic support to help you get it working in the way that you want. There's a lot of great information on the internet. That's another beautiful thing about the day and age we live in is you just search attachment theory in couples. Loads of great information out there that get your gears turning.
The other thing that I think too, and I think this can be a challenge, because there are a lot of folks out there. Well, just as you alluded to, I mean, earlier when you talked about a financial planner, like knowing intimate details about someone's financial lives that even their closest friends probably don't know. So this is intense. This is an intensely private subject, but I think too, like there becomes this the challenge is when you have friction, and yes, the internet can give us information,
Mm-hmm.
but it can't necessarily give us wisdom. And I think that a lot of times you like think about health, right? Not even like mental health.
Yeah,
We go to WebMD and we start searching up, and like we'll read WebMD for 30 minutes, and we're like, all right, here's the diagnosis, here's what has to happen, and we haven't thought about, and I know that drives physicians crazy because people will come in and they'll start telling the physician, well, let me tell you what I think's wrong with me, doc. And the doc's like, well, I what do my degrees mean? I don't, I know nothing.
that's right. That's right. Yeah.
And I
Oh,
think a lot of times we have this idea because we want results and we want to know, and we want solutions now.
yeah.
There's this strong urge to go like, let's get the instant answer so we can go ahead and get started on the fix.
Yeah.
And sometimes the fix isn't immediate. Sometimes the fix is process. We have to go through a process to like uncover, discover, and talk through and communicate about these things that we have not really been equipped. Most people have not been equipped to really discuss in a constructive way.
Yeah.
Do you find yourself having to teach people how to talk to each other about certain topics, especially like money being one of them, without it becoming an emotion fest?
Yeah, well, and I think, I do appreciate your point about, we have this cultural myth that somehow if I just have the right information, everything will be okay.
Yeah.
When it comes to our psychological and relational health, new information alone is usually not going to give you the long-term change that you want. you really have to have corrective therapeutic experiences. And that's where working with a highly trained therapist that knows how to engage in the right relationship patterns and techniques literally is like going to the chiropractor who knows how to put his hands on your spine and give you that just right adjustment that all of a sudden your back opens up and you're like, holy shit. I mean, you could have read about getting a chiropractic
Amazing.
adjustment online, but your back is still going to be twisted.
Yeah.
So
Oh, you know what I was thinking while you were saying, like what literally popped in my head was, now if you go into one of these big box athletic stores, they sell those inversion like tables now where people, it's like, I'm not going to go see a chiropractor. I'm going to go buy this chair and hang myself like upside down, and that's going to fix my back pain.
no, no, and I think, this is really where going to a good professional that has the licensure appropriate to the area of needed, whether it's the CFP for financial planning or marriage and family therapist or licensed professional counselor or psychologist, our ability to assess comes not from just book experience, but a lot of client time, and so we know how I mean, as much as there is to still learn about how the mind works, we do have a pretty good understanding of how relationships in our history, and yes, your mother and father shaped how you see yourself. Sorry to tell
Yep.
you, but it is true. There's no doubt in the science about that. And so I think, and I'll just share this personal anecdote. I mean, Monday, I just hit the skid. Sunday was a little rough, and Monday I just wasn't able to do what I needed to do. I had a standing therapy appointment, and that's where my analogy came from. I was like, I'm kind of looking forward to therapy today because I know we're gonna be in there. She's gonna ask the right questions, and my mind's just gonna. It's like when you go to the chiropractor and you have that good adjustment. It's like everything opens up, and you walk out of there, and you're like, I can move again.
Right.
And that's the beautiful thing. I think once you really get to know your mental health and your particular patterns and how you get knotted up, because you're not always going to be able to stop your mind from getting knotted up.
That's a great analogy, getting knotted up. That's a great way to put it. Because one of the things that I commonly tell people is like one is it is incredibly difficult to make sound financial decisions, when you are stressed out, tired,
Absolutely.
mentally spent. And what topic can be more stressful than money?
Absolutely.
So the more heightened, your emotional sense, or if we're talking about a couple and we know that there's, like I said earlier, the uneasy truce that is there, and and the emotion starts to build, our ability to think clearly and like make wise choices, I think, is diminished. And that's one of the things I always think why having a third party is not to be a referee,
Right.
but it's to help facilitate conversation and help them be able to have the information that they need, but also share insights when asked, and give guidance when asked, and also help them come to the best overall decision for themselves that they may not be able to get there, if left to their own devices.
Yeah. Well, and this is where like another part of the technical piece, and I hope this is not too boring for your audience. It's the stuff that gets me super excited. Um, we have this whole area, an explanation that's called the window of tolerance, right? And you just imagine an upper bar and a lower bar. And if we're in between those two bars, our mind is working pretty well. And we know the brain, in a very simple way, is organized in three levels, right? We have the instinct brain, which is the core, goes down in the spinal column. The next layer is the limbic, which is the emotional brain. And then the next layer is the neocortex, which is the thinking brain. What happens when we get too emotionally aroused, we go either over the window bar or under the window bar. And those three parts of the brain are no longer connected to each other. And so this is where you get all the accusations. Well, she's so irrational. Well, he just shuts down. Well, yeah, you're absolutely right. Their body has left the window of tolerance and safety and gone either over the windowsill or under the windowsill. There's a physiological reaction. Our whole autonomic nervous system, which has a gas pedal and a brake wired in
Right.
to work automatically when we sense threat. And money evokes the threat response faster than just about anything.
It's amazing.
And so that's where like therapy is helping to, for most couples, expand or stretch out that upper bar and lower bar so they have more emotional range that they can tolerate working through difficult topics. And then also recognize, oh, well, our body has taken us out of our rational thinking relational self and gone into self-defense mode. Until we get back between our bars, there's no point in trying to have a productive conversation. And that's the role that I think the planners can help oftentimes is help the couples. I mean, I don't know how many couples have actually told you this, but told you they either had a fight in the car on the way to your office or a fight in the car after they left your office. They wouldn't fight in front of you, but they had the fight before or after.
I can't recall hearing that, but I'm smart enough to know that it's happened,
Yeah.
because I've been in rooms before where you can feel the air change,
Yeah.
and it's like,
Right.
like, okay, this is getting tense. And and unfortunately we've had some folks that chose I think personally chose not to work with us, because in going through our discovery, we uncovered some hot button issues
Yeah.
that were innocently enough. We're just trying to, go through our process.
Yeah.
And because it triggered that
Oh,
strife, that stress, the disagreement,
yeah.
and we got to keep the truce. So, well, we can't go back in there because they're going to ask us about that again, and we're going to be right back here. So we're going to avoid that. And I think also, to add to that, one of the things that I have found in my experience is that most people, when they're seeking out financial advice, it's because something has happened. There's some type of life event, there's some kind of triggering event. And in some cases, not all, but in some cases, like, they want to come in and they're like, just help me, just fix this solution. Just give me this fix.
Mhm.
I don't want to talk about anything else. We don't want to deal with anything else. Just help me fix this problem, because this is where it hurts right here, right now.
Yep.
And for us, for our firm, like, we don't like to work that way. We think very holistically. Like, we care just as much about Ed at 75 years old as we do as Ed at 55, and we're wanting help you build the pathways and the bridges that will take you there, where you want to be, who you want to be. And so, for those that are just wanting that very transactional, just fix this, and don't look behind my curtain, that also creates some obstacles, because there again, it's that avoidance, where we know how, if they feel or they see me, then there's going to be angst, or there's going to be more issues that uncover themselves, and I don't want to deal with any of that.
Oh, man, you're so spot on. I mean, if you start looking at some of the research and even just the anecdotal evidence about financial transparency between couples, at a minimum, there's 30% of couples that have some secret account.
Yeah, I know.
And on the high side, we're looking at 70+%. And what are you
It's
doing? You're trying to open up every closet door in their financial life and say, we need to see it all so we can know how your cash flow links to your net worth, links to your tax, so that we can create the right estate plan and make sure it's all connected, right? That's what you're talking about with holistic financial planning. That's the financial planning process is we need to see everything. If you have a side account with $100,000 or $50,000 in debt and you don't tell us about that, it's going to come out. It's going to show up. And so,
in the interest of complete transparency, I just experienced this in my own life. And so, we recently lost my mom. I think I shared that with you
yeah,
when we sat down, and so that's been, an emotional event for sure, but we're going through things. And my dad calls me, and I'm specifically saying it's my parents, because I don't want to use vague language and have
yeah,
people think I'm talking about clients. This is like in my family life.
yeah,
My dad calls me about this account. Well, my mom had this little tiny account. It was like, I mean, it wasn't big, but it was like this little tiny account that
yeah.
he didn't know about, that she had done some stuff. And he's like, well, I didn't even have I didn't even know she had that.
Mhm.
And, it seems so innocent, but it's kind of like what you're talking about. It's just like, these little things that we don't think there's a big deal. And I can't help it. I can't help but think that they saw that or their parents did that, and then that was deemed like, oh, this is okay, and I mean, and it's just, you know we have this interest, we want to keep the peace,
Mhm.
but at the same time it's like, well, what could that be, a seed, what seed could that be planting for down the road? Or if that's discovered while it's innocent to you, what's the internal money script going to say to your partner? Like, what's that going to trigger in them?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think it there's a place for financial privacy, right? Where you can say, yeah, there's a lot of couples that wanna manage and have a little bit of their own free discretionary money where they don't experience any
Sure.
criticism or anything, and I get that, but I think you're right that a lot of times that's never even agreed on. They just do it. And, oftentimes they feel like they've gotta do that because maybe their partner has created an environment where it's not safe to talk about having some of your own needs met. I'm not saying that's for your folks, but just in
Right,
general,
right.
I mean, I
Well,
watch that happen all the time in my practice where, look, this secret accounts, the secret spending, the overspending is all symptomatic of the underlying relational health. We gotta get to
yeah.
relationship health, we gotta get to the family of origin stuff, flush that out, and then see where we're at.
So that's a good, way for us to circle back to when you say family of origin. Your course, with the family tree. Like, tell us, a little bit about it, because you and I we could keep going, but our listeners, especially with when a lot of people don't have a commute right now, so they've indulged us this far if they've made it. But tell us a little bit about that course and what people can or should be expecting to get out of that.
Yeah, so I think the first thing that they're gonna get is most people have never even thought about how their family shaped the way that they think about money. So you're gonna get that right out of the bat. Just sign up for the course and get started. It's like paradigm shifting. Then hopefully at the deeper level, you're gonna start to have those aha moments and say, "Oh, you mean when my dad lost his job when I was 10 and I couldn't get the bicycle, and that left me with some pain around not being able to have a bike like all the other kids. Now when I wanna have something I don't feel like I can get it, I just get so overwhelmed, or I just buy it impulsively. Oh, that's all connected. Okay." And then that can start that process of letting go of some of that pain so that when you do get to that adult bicycle, whatever it is for you, it's like, "Yeah, I wanna get it, but I'm okay not getting it, or I can make a plan to get it." It doesn't become this reactionary thing, or it doesn't it's oftentimes we're managing between impulsive consumption and complete avoidance and withdrawal around so many financial decisions, and it's like, where's the pleasurable middle, right?
Right.
That's what we're shooting for is, like, not that we have to be some harsh critic on ourselves about, "Oh, we can't enjoy our money, we can't do anything, we gotta pinch every penny," or, laissez-faire, let the good times roll, it'll all
Right.
work out, right? I mean,
Well, I know that, in doing some of the interior work on myself, like, it's opened up some, what I mean, and I'm a financial professional, been doing this for, almost 11 years now, and I'm like doing this work and I'm like, oh, like, that's one of my triggers. Like, that's something that really touches something off in me.
yeah,
And since I've started doing this exploration, as the universe would, of course, demand, my wife and I, we've had some things come up that if,
yeah,
where there's an area of contention, and but then I've stopped them. That's the, here's why I'm getting, just so like, here's why I'm feeling this way, and it goes back to this. And I would note that it didn't stop the emotion from happening,
right.
but I have a better understanding of what's going on with me emotionally, and by sharing that, like, I feel like it helps her like have some empathy, and then it creates this. It kind of knocks down some of those walls that we're trying to put up, and like we can kind of like, oh, we're not going to slide all the way down the mountain. We're gonna, we'll slip a little bit, but we're not gonna, like, this won't become an avalanche. We're just gonna, oh, we skidded, but here we are, and we righted the ship, and we're back.
Yeah, I think that's right, and I think, to let people off the hook and say, this it's a journey, and it is a process. It's stages. I mean, I get twinges of anxiety when I go to Costco and buy something, even when my wife's expecting me to buy it, because I just have this story in my head that she's gonna be upset with me. It has nothing to do with her. It has to do with some of the things that happen in my own family. So,
Sure.
but it's progress, not perfection. It's recognizing, like, oh, I mean, I'm I don't like that I have that feeling come up, but I'm a lot more peace with being able to recognize, like, oh, there it is. All right.
Yeah.
And then I go home and I can be more open. And then, like, when she's not upset with me, I'm like, oh, sweet. Let's enjoy, whatever it is I just bought at Costco. That's pretty cool. You know, plug
Yeah,
out
I
there.
think of it as the more and more I try to, get my head wrapped around, these different areas of practice and expertise. I'm really enjoying seeing how so many things work together, because this isn't to say that, every single person in the world needs like therapy, but one of the things that is, that I say all the time is money touches everything.
It does.
And and if so many people don't have money skills, so many people don't have aren't confident to discuss money.
Right.
They feel like it's a subject that needs to be in its little box, and if we have to, we'll open the lid, but as soon as we can, we're going to close the lid back.
Yeah.
And what, ultimately, I think what everybody wants, if you try to strip away all of the exterior, most of us, we want healthy relationships. We want to, have a fantastic relationship with our spouse. We want to have a great relationship with our kids. We want our kids to grow up healthy and be independent, and be able to go out into the world and make their own way. And these innate desires that we have. And so many people that I know that are closer, that, I've got some older clients that are in their, late 80s, early 90s. And, none of them are talking about, man, I really made this terrible investment choice back in my 70s. They're thinking like, I can't wait for the holidays because I'm going to get to see my grandkids.
Mhm.
Or, I can't wait till it's June because we're going to take that family vacation every year that we go on.
Mhm.
And your sense of what's important really starts to crystallize. And so I want to help people find ways to strip away these stumbling blocks, these obstacles, and get clearer about that. Because just like we used earlier, the 7% compounding, if we can begin, with the right focus earlier, what kind of fruit does that bear for us over a lifetime versus like getting it figured out when we're finally retired? How many years did we lose along the way?
Yeah, and I'll end on this note, is it's also that realization that you're not gonna have financial independence in year 1. You're not
Sure.
gonna have relational independence or freedom or connection, whatever, I don't know, financial intimacy. It's not gonna be the portfolio that you want it to be in year 1 when you start the investment. It takes time to build out a healthy portfolio relationally, and all the skills and things that you need to have in it, the right asset mix, if you will. I mean, the money analogies are just wonderful for relationships, but if you keep making constant investment in your relationship and building out the different relational skills and healing what you need to heal, man, you're going to have a great life. It's not always going to feel that way. You're going to have some down years, but the market return over the long term, if you stay properly allocated and keep investing, is positive.
That's a beautiful way to sum it up. Well, Ed, man, this has been so great. Thank you for being so generous with your time, as always. I love every minute of our conversations together. For anyone that's listening that wants to find you, how can people find you, Ed?
Oh man, I'm so excited to say they can find me in a lot of different ways. They can go to healthyloveandmoney.com. If they're a LinkedIn person, they can go LinkedIn. If they're a Facebook person, they can find me on Facebook. If you're on Instagram, you can find me on Instagram. So I know that's not every social platform, but hopefully that's enough for everybody to have one place to connect.
Perfect. Well, I will make sure that all of your info, all of your links and everything is in the show notes on our website, vertexcapitaladvisors.com. And Ed, we're gonna have to do this again. So this is not a one-off. We'll wait a little while, because we've talked a long time. We'll let it simmer and let it marinate.
Yeah.
But we'll definitely want to have you back and maybe have a more focused topic where we take a deep dive into something specific. But man, thank you so much for your time, and for you guys that are listening. As always, thank you for tuning into the show. If you have anything or any topics you would like us to discuss, you can email us directly at themoneyhuddle@vcplanning.com. And as always, we'll talk to you next time.